From Florida's capital, this is Power Play.
I'm Alia Faraj Johnson. Florida delegates are promised a seat at the table, but will their vote count at the Democratic National Convention? Public funding of election campaigns, should we keep it or kill it? And finally, should women seeking an abortion be required to get an ultrasound, no matter how far along they are? All that and more this week on Power Play, with our guests, Mike Vasalinda, Bureau Chief of Capitol News Service, and Paul Fleming, State Editor of Gannett News Service. Welcome, gentlemen. Why don't we get started? Mike, let's talk about the delegates.
Howard Dean blinked.
And
who knows what's going to happen. This campaign still have to agree to something, and everybody's still looking for an advantage. And until they figure out that there's no advantage to be had, the delegates aren't going to be seated, or there won't be a formula for it.
Paul, do you think they have a plan?
No. This is not going to be resolved before the convention. It may not be resolved during the convention. All the no's counting of these delegates say that by the primaries, neither Senator Obama nor Senator Clinton are going to have the number that they're going to need to get the nomination. It's going to come down to the superdelegates, and until that is resolved, then the Florida delegation is not going to be seated until one or the other emerges.
Yeah, Pennsylvania may have some play as to what happens depending on if it isn't a double-digit win for Hillary Clinton, but I think Paul's right. I think we got months to go.
Yeah, and is it a gesture too little, too late?
I think so. A lot of damage has been done, undoubtedly. And as Mike said, Chairman Dean blinked, but he blinked without a solution or saying we're going to fix this.
Yeah, he finally said we've got to do it, but offered no plan and has really no authority at this point.
Public financing. Let's talk about some of the changes that are being proposed in the legislature.
Well, the House this week did pass a bill that would eliminate public financing, or welfare for politicians, as Representative Hayes, the sponsor, called it. There's a trade-off with that campaign finance, as it was to cap spending in campaigns to try and keep huge moneyed interests from influencing too much. So to do away with it is an ideological standpoint from the sponsor. But we'd also be losing those caps if it were approved in November by voters.
Right. I think the problem here is that it was the Republican legislature that doubled the amount going to politicians because it was to their benefit, and now they, for some reason, don't believe it is to their benefit when they apparently look like they're going to have some trouble in the next election cycle.
Another issue, a new proposal will triple the amount of money set aside for children to get vouchers to attend private schools. The African American lawmakers are behind this measure, and they're aligned with the Republicans on this one. But public school teachers may think it's unconstitutional.
Well, I think there is a real danger that if this moves forward, that the Florida Education Association will take a look at challenging this program in court. They've sort of seen it as being not very important. There's about 20,000 students in it right now, $80 million. They see it as small potatoes. But this plan grows it to $250 million over 5 years. And all of a sudden, they feel like that's taking a lot of money away from local schools. So I think if the legislature does this, I think we'll see this program in court, which may not have gone to court if they don't do this.
It's interesting the constituencies that this pulls on either side of the aisle and either side of the spectrum with, as you said, it's how much you care about your kids versus an ideological standpoint, perhaps on the idea of vouchers and accountability for schools, and they come together. And somewhere, I don't know if in the middle is the right way to say it, but the organized education is against it because exactly as Mike said.
I thought the interesting argument on this one is that it actually saves the state money.
And that's what I was going to get at.
Because it's $3,750 is what the state pays, although that will grow as well. But that's far less than what the state would give to the public school systems. But the schools point out is they still have to run the lights, they still have to pay the custodial crew, they still have to run the school buses, and that's where some of that money goes.
But Ollie asked, is this going to end up in court? And the answer is yes.
Well, let's move on to ultrasounds. Women seeking an abortion may be required to get an ultrasound and to view that ultrasound. Thoughts?
Doesn't look like it's going anywhere in the Senate right now. This is one of those things that happens in an election year when particularly when there's no money. This is a way to drive people forward.
Paul?
Absolutely. More populist House passes this and gives you a vote to take home if that's your constituency.
Now, one final thought. Power play of the week, if you have one to share.
The Senate passing out the Ellen Krotzer bill instead of making him wait until next week.
Paul?
I would agree. Justice is the winner of the power play this week.
Thank you both. Go to the Safety Review for all the latest political news, and we'll see you next week on Power Play.